Now, I'm not wearing the magnification glasses because they're really styling, which they are. But I'm going to be needing them for some of the fine work that I'm going to be doing while I'm installing the frets on this guitar. In the last video, we made the fretboard true and level and flat. That'll help us when we get to our final setup. And if you haven't done that yet, please do. It's going to give you benefits down the line. I'm going to use these right away to take a look at my fret wire and to show you something here. This is a StewMac fret wire. It comes straight. There are others that come curved, but I'm not concerned with that at the moment. What I am concerned with is a very fine little detail in here. If you look closely under magnification, you'll see that there's a small fillet of material where the tang meets the crown of the body here. Now that means if I want this fret to sit perfectly flat and tight to my fretboard, I'm going to have to relieve a little bit of that hard fretboard material. I'm certainly not going to be able to crush it down and get this to sit all the way down on the fretboard. So I'm going to take a tool and make a little chamfer on the top of these, which will allow for that fillet. It'll also help with getting the fret to go in initially, and in the event that I do have to pull one out in a refret in the future, or if I have a problem with a fret right now, that little chamfer will help guarantee that I don't chip the fretboard out while extracting the fret. To make way for that little fillet, I'm going to use a triangular model maker's file with sharp corners on it, and I'm just going to run that along each kerf. And I have to go at it both directions because I don't want to drag it out and put a mark in my binding here. If you don't have binding, you can go all the way through. I'll just go ahead and knock off all these corners. Fixtures and jigs can get to be a little expensive. If this is your first guitar, or if you just don't feel like making an investment into creating a fret bending jig like this, you might want to consider buying some pre-coiled fret wire and using that instead, because then you can skip this whole step. You can buy these bending jigs at the different luthier supply warehouses. I happen to make this one myself. It's got two bearings on it set at a distance apart and away from this larger bearing. And if I run my fret wire through it, it'll come out the other side with something less than a 16-inch radius on it. That way it'll fit into my fretboard nice and evenly. But if you don't want to make that investment, if you already have straight fret wire, if that's the stuff that you want to use, here's a simple jig. Takes a little bit of learning the technique. I have to relearn it again here, but it's just a piece of wood. This has got, I think, a half-inch hole drilled through it. Not critical, but it does have to allow the fret wire to pass through cleanly. Now I'm going to go about halfway through the fret wire here, and I'm going to give it a little bit of tension. I'm making sure that the tang is pointed to one side and the crown to another. And you can see, well, it kind of made a curve. If you get it right, it takes a little more effort than I remembered. There we go. You can curve your fret wire that way within a reasonable tolerance. I know there's a lot of investment in tools here, but this is one that you really need to make. You need to get a set of good flush end nippers. Now, these are flush end nippers on the right, and they're exactly the same as these regular end nippers on the left, except if you'll notice on the ones on the left, they've got a double bevel on the cutting edge. And the flush end nippers have had that top bevel ground off. They're flush. It only goes to a single bevel here. That allows you to get in close on your cuts here, but it makes it a rather delicate edge, and it works fine with this relatively soft metal that we have on the fretboards. But you'll see I forgot and picked up this set when I thought it was these ones, and started cutting some string wire with them, and really boogered up the cutting edge on this one side here. So I'm limited to this one side over here, and I just put the black marker on it to make sure that I knew which was which. I'm going to work my way from the wide end of the fretboard up to the nut where it's narrower, because if I make any sort of errors in a cut on one of these frets, I can move up one or two fret spaces and it'll be just a little bit shorter, and I'll be able to salvage the fret. So I don't need to measure this right now, just lay it on the fretboard and cut it a little bit over length. Now, if this weren't a bound fretboard, I could move on to installing the fret. But I've got this solid piece of wood at each side that I've got to account for in the tang. I've got to remove a little bit of that. And that's fairly easily done. I'm just going to set the tang on here and look for one of the barbs. When I measured this, I know that what I need to do is take off up to just about the second barb there. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this in, and then I'm going to relax my right hand here. You can see I've relaxed it so I can push the crown of the fret down on top of the flush nippers and make a cut. I'm going to flip this over then and make a second cut, but before I do that I'm going to come off my workbench because I don't want that little piece to fall on the bench and get caught in my work. Some people like these modified sheet metal nippers for doing this work, but I've never had real luck with them. As flush as that was, it could be a little bit cleaner. I've installed frets like this before and they work fine, but I can see that minor little bit of tang left over in the finished product, so I want to get this a little bit closer. I've filed a small groove to hold the fret in place on top of my little fret bender, and a little bit of file work here, and we'll have that thing cleaned up in no time. There are a lot of techniques for actually installing the frets. I'm going to go through hammering first, since that's kind of the basic. But in every situation I'm going to want to put a little bit of water in the fret slot. Now this isn't so much as lubrication as it is trying to soften the wood just a little bit to be able to get it to seat better, get the barbs a better chance of grabbing. Now you'll notice that the crown on the fret is a little bit greater than the fretboard itself. It's exactly how I want it to be. Now I'm going to use a brass-faced hammer, something that is not going to damage the soft, relatively soft fret wire here. You can use a plastic face or other sort of fretting hammers. This is my favorite. I feel like I got a little more control. But I could go and whack this right in the middle right now and get it to seat down, but that's going to destroy the camber I already have put into the fret. Make it do a little butterfly thing up. So I'm going to try and tack down the two corners first and then work my way to the middle. You can see it's starting to come down. Now it does take a little bit of force, and you can see the water starting to spray out from underneath it. Now, I want to make sure I get the whole thing down. And you'll notice that when I'm hammering, I'm holding the hammer down. I'm not bouncing it off or letting it fly around. It's kind of like follow through on a tennis swing or a golf swing. So I want to push that down, and then I give it a little bit of a tap on each end. But what I don't want to do is bend that thing over around, because that's just it's gonna give me more trouble when I'm trying to level out my frets. Now I nip off the ends as I go, and again it's with the flush nippers with a very slight angle and just leaving them up against the fretboard. But again, I do that off the bench and into a garbage can, so I'm not making a mess of little bits of metal all over my workbench. Now that I have my frets installed and they've been trimmed off with the flush nippers, I want to start working the edges and ends off of these so that they play well. They feel nice on your hand as you're playing the instrument. If you didn't do a bound fretboard, you'll have the tang to deal with as well at this point. I don't, because I've got the binding on it and I've already nipped that off. But first step in this is to bevel the ends of the frets at a consistent angle. I use about a 30-degree angle. You can buy jigs like this at the luthier supply houses, or you can make one like I did. It's just a block of wood with a radius that will allow this to touch both edges of the frets and not in the middle, which will keep a nice even line. And then I broke off a file and installed it at about a 30-degree angle. And I'll just go ahead and use that to finish cleaning up the ends of the frets. Unlike the triangle file that I used earlier, this one has had all of the corners buffed off and polished so they don't damage the fretboard on this next phase. I'm going to keep the triangle file with one bevel up, which will give me the consistent angle on the bottom, and make about 2 passes each direction on the fretboard, on each fret, just to start easing the edges. I've got a drafting erasing guard and some 400 sandpaper here. The guard's going to help keep me from damaging the fretboard as I just take the little burr that's left off the top of each one of these frets. We're going to do some more work on these after we've leveled the fretboard. So for now, this will be enough. This is probably good enough for now. I've been inspecting it with the magnification and my fingers going up and down to make sure that this is all smooth and it feels good. The player's going to want to have a nice smooth run as they go up and down the fretboard here. In a subsequent video from here, after we've got this attached to the body, we'll do a final dressing of all of the frets, and at that point we'll be polishing these ends. So good enough for now is good enough for now. I'll see you at the next video.